This is the 9th video in my series on classical games from the 19th and early 20th century. This game was played in 1857 in the First American Chess Congress. Paul Morphy and Louis Paulsen met in the final. This was the first game of their match. Morphy was white and Paulsen was black. The game started with a Sicilian defence. Paulsen was an early pioneer of this defence, in particular the approach employed in this game, where black plays e6 but not d6, so as to be able to develop his dark squared bishop actively. Morphy started with e4 and Paulsen responded with c5. Play went d4, c takes d4, knight f3. This is an inaccurate move order for reaching the open Sicilian. Instead, c3 is the Mora gambit, which is more common here, although not necessarily better, as it's a somewhat dubious gambit where white struggles to prove compensation against best play by black. In any case, white played knight f3, and now a6 transposes to an inferior line of the O'Kelly Sicilian. After knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5 is a superior version of the Sveshnikov Sicilian, as white cannot play knight b5 because of the pawn on a6. Black will be able to develop his bishop to b4 or c5 with a good game. Now, it's not surprising that black didn't go for this, because this was before the O'Kelly Sicilian was invented. And the move that black did play, e6, is perfectly fine, because after knight takes d4, play has transposed back to the regular lines of the open Sicilian. Now, many of the black lines from this position are known collectively as the Paulsen variation on account of Paulsen's pioneering work on the defence, although they have also acquired, at least in some countries, distinct names of their own. So, for instance, here, knight c6 is known as the Taimanov variation, although strictly speaking, the pure Taimanov approach actually arises only after knight c3, a6, when, if white plays a move such as bishop e2, black plays knight on g to e7, intending knight takes d4, queen takes d4, knight c6. So that's one approach. Instead of a6 after knight c3, queen c7 is the most popular move, although a6 still remains a regular guest to tournaments. Now, instead of knight c6, another possibility is a6, which is known in some places as the Khan variation. And one of the main lines of this actually bears a certain similarity to what happens in the game, and this is the line bishop d3, bishop c5. Now, although those two fourth moves are what would be played nowadays, this game was played back at a time when the defence was a very rare thing and was only really being developed. So after knight takes d4, black played the immediate bishop c5. Play went knight b3, bishop b6, knight c3, knight e7, bishop f4. White focuses on the weakened d6 square. Now, Here black just castled, but this is an error as it allows white to play bishop d6, and black really should have played d5, preventing bishop d6. Although after something such as queen h5, intending to castle long, white still has a promising position. Note that black cannot really prevent white from castling queenside with d takes e4, because knight takes e4 castles bishop c4, followed by castling kingside, looks even more promising for white than simply allowing queenside castling, when at least the situation is made somewhat murkier. Anyway, as I said, rather than playing d5, black played castles, and white got the opportunity to play bishop d6. Play continued f5, e5, a6. It's important to prevent knight b5. And now the move f4 would have been very strong, shoring up the pawn e5 and intending to castle queenside by playing queen f3 followed by castles long. However, white played bishop e2, a sensible developing move, but far less incisive. Play went knight on b to c6, castles, rook f7. Now, here white decided to play king h1, unpinning the f pawn and so preparing f4. But this is a little slow and should have allowed black to create sufficient counterplay. Instead of king h1, more incisive was bishop h5, forcing some concession from black. Now, g6 just weakens the black king side, and after bishop f3, white clearly has a very promising position. While after knight g6, black doesn't weaken his king side, but now his pieces are in an almighty tangle. After knight a4, both bishop c7, f4, shoring up the e5 pawn, and bishop a7, c4, gaining space on the queen side, are obviously very promising for white. He has a strong bind on the position. Now, after king h1, which was played in the game, black should have taken the opportunity to play bishop c7, bishop takes c7, queen takes c7, f4, and now the powerful g5, creating counterplay against white's pawn centre. However, black evidently wasn't attracted by this possibility, or perhaps didn't even consider it, and went instead for f4, preventing white from playing f4 directly, but weakening the e4 square and indeed the f pawn itself. White played knight e4, and now black should have tried knight g6, attacking the white e pawn, and now white probably has to sacrifice it, but will get good compensation because of black's terrible development and the weaknesses in his position. However, black decided to play knight f5, looking to go after the bishop on d6, but this doesn't really solve the problem of the development of his queen side. Play went bishop h5, and now knight g6 is no longer an option in response, so black felt compelled to play g6, but this weakens his king side. Now, bishop f3 is probably the best response. This is the best square for the bishop, but white played bishop g4 instead, although this isn't a terrible move. Now, black should have taken the opportunity to lop off the bishop with knight takes d6, although after knight takes d6, white's position is obviously still very promising. However, he played, instead of knight takes d6, the rather passive knight g7. Now, white could, as in one of the previous variations, have now just played c4, increasing his space advantage on the queen side and continuing to squeeze black. But he decided to bring up his queen with queen f3 instead, looking, no doubt, for a kingside attack. Now, black needed to try something like bishop c3, although after queen c3, white is obviously still doing very well. But instead, he played the weakening move h5, creating a terrible weakness on g6. And white just responded with a natural bishop h3. And now he has a considerable advantage. Now, black played queen h4, perhaps hoping to push his g-pawn, but now white just played knight f6 check, king h8, queen e4, threatening queen takes g6, so queen g5 and g3, looking to force open lines on the king side. Now, f takes g3 can be met by the very strong f4. And so black decided to try to keep things closed with f3. But now white found an extremely powerful tactical possibility. Knight d2. This has the simple idea that after queen takes d2, queen takes g6, black cannot do anything about the threat of queen h7 mate. So instead of taking on d2, black tried bishop d8, but after knight takes f3, white had an extra pawn in addition to all his positional advantages. Play went queen h6, rook g1, perhaps intending to push g4, and now black could no longer tolerate the knight on f6, and so play bishop takes f6. And after e takes f6, now rook takes f6 doesn't work because of bishop f4, hitting the queen, queen h7, knight g5, hitting the queen again, queen g8, rook on g to e1, and white completely dominates the position. So in the game, instead of taking on f6, black tried knight e8, white continued with bishop f4, hitting the queen. And now black doesn't have a satisfactory response. g5 is just met by knight takes g5, which is obviously winning. Queen h7 is met by knight g5, knight takes f6, bishop e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5. Again with an overwhelming position. And so in the game, black tried knight takes f6, attempting to be a bit cute, but white was cuter with the neat tactic queen takes c6, which just wins a piece. So if black takes the queen, say with d takes c6, white plays bishop takes h6. And as I said, he's a piece up here in an endgame, and so is easily winning. Instead of d takes c6, black tried queen takes f4, but now white has queen takes c8 check, a nice intermezzo. And after rook takes c8, g takes f4, white is just a piece up, so the rest is simple. Play went rook takes c2, rook on a to c1, rook takes f2, rook c8 check, knight g8, knight e5, hitting the rook on f7, rook g7, knight takes g6 check, king h7, knight f8 check, king h6, knight takes d7, rook takes d7, rook on c takes g8, rook takes f4, bishop takes e6, rook e7, and now black resigned without waiting for white's response, as there is now a forced mate in short order after rook on 8 to g6, king h7, bishop g8 check, king h8, rook h6 check, rook h7, rook takes h7, mate.